Welcome to A Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn. Today I have back with me Kimberly Britton and her husband, Gary. Gary, welcome to the show. Kimberly, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to talk about a recent transition that you did, but before that, why don't you introduce Gary?
I'll be delighted to. So this is my business and life partner, as I like to say. We have been married for 27 years, yes?
Yes.
Coming up on 28. And so we had founded several years ago a consulting firm called Britton Strategies, but I was working in another capacity at the time. And so some things changed there, what we can talk about in a minute, and I had the opportunity to make the leap to join him. And so he had already had a robust executive coaching practice and some business consulting, and working, interestingly enough, we both worked in the energy and utility sector. So some of our clients overlapped at the time. So it was one of those interesting things, because our work is confidential, that there were some things we could share and some things we couldn't. But anyway, Gary's an amazing talented, and I've learned since we've been working together, very buttoned up, much more than I knew as a professional. So that's been fun to learn him as a professional. And we are such a great team anyway. And, we have the spiritual component, and obviously we have that emotional tie and a real respect for each other. So anyway, it's been great to work with him and learn more about him I didn't even know after 30 plus years of even knowing each other. So,
yeah, it's fun when our spouses get to discover part of us they didn't really know about.
Yeah.
Christina had a similar experience many years ago. She saw me speak for the first time in a training scenario, and she's like, "I didn't know that part of you." So that is fun. So last time you were on the show, by the way, gotten lots of great feedback on that particular show and the wisdom that you shared there. So one of the reasons I'm excited to have you back today. But you did something a lot of people do, but not always do well, and that's transition and out and shut down an organization. Press release just went out on that. Congratulations on winding it up so well.
Thank you.
Talk a few minutes about that whole experience.
Yes, for people who hadn't heard me speak previously, I had the privilege of co-founding and leading and starting from scratch a nonprofit called Epicenter. I was back in 2016. I was recruited out of a collaboration of CPS Energy, the largest municipally owned, vertically integrated electric and gas utility in the United States, and their vendor allies. So Itron, Landis+Gyr, and OCI Solar, and those are smart grid, smart meter, large-scale solar and solar manufacturing. These folks came together and seeded this organization and gave me this immense gift and said, here's what we want to do. Will you take it and build it? And by the way, here's some ramp money. And so it was incredible to be able to go in and create a culture, because that was one of the things I'd never really had a chance, is to start from scratch, hire the people that I knew would be allied with us. Vision, the people that we ended up hiring were incredibly resilient and just guerrillas. Meaning like guerrilla warfare. They were just strong and powerful in the nicest possible way. So all that to say is I worked on this for 7 years, and I always promised the board, we're a startup, right? And so anyone who's built, we always called them new businesses or small businesses before, but anyone who has worked in that capacity as an entrepreneur, one thing you know is that you hang precariously at all times, depending on when you really hit that moment where you scale. And so we were hitting our stride up until it's about 2019. Things were going and blowing. We made some great decisions, some good pivots, and we were becoming self-sustaining. And then COVID. 2020 hit, and it derailed all of our revenue-producing activities, because it involves so much of face-to-face and large events and those kinds of things. What we were doing as a nonprofit was working with startups in the energy, particularly utility sector. We also had a thought leadership programming aspect, and then we developed a consulting practice. All that to say is I always promise the board that if I get to a point I cannot see down the horizon of 12 months that I know where our revenue is coming from, I'll let you know and we'll call it or consider it. And so that time came in the midst of 2023. And so I wanted to do it early enough where there's no panic. There's no freaking out, that people have an opportunity to make decisions clearly and prudently and respectfully. And the board, amazing people, had been working with me, had given me so much latitude, trusted me, and we began to work through the process. Yeah. I can tell you that I know of other things that have gone away or changed or shut down, et cetera, merged, nonprofits in particular. And it can be such a challenge because of people's fear, their panic again, this idea that there's so much uncertainty. It is hard. This is interesting. One of the hardest things to do is to hang in the midst of a balance, so to speak, like having a sword of Damocles over your head at all times when you never know when it's going to drop, right? So this is one of those times for at least a year that my team and I were working through this to figure out, what is this end game? What does this look like? So I can just tell you that we made sure we knew what our financial resources were. We began to strategize in a longitudinal fashion about how we would reduce staff and how we ensured they had an exit. And then the 4 remaining executives stayed with me. God bless them. Andy Littlejohn, Liz Thompson, and Jill Vassar we still do work with all 3 of those women, and they're just an amazing set of characters that have stood up, not been afraid, fearless to stay with us through the end. And as a result, with the board's input and oversight and help, we got to the end of this in 2023 where it was officially stopped operating. And then I've spent the last 6 months, and Jill has helped me as well, Jill Vassar, really do all the ticking and tying that you have to do, ensuring that the financials really are correct, that all of the expenses are prudently and appropriately taken care of, and that we wind it down. Now, I can tell you, and this is no trying to blow myself up, but one of the things I've also seen is there are not very many leaders, because I've had people say this to me, who would do that and stay, because they would be so concerned about their self-interest. But I can tell you, I could not have looked myself in the mirror, or him, frankly, or my Lord, and had I not taken care of things in a way as a good steward would. Mm-hmm. The Lord demands that of me. My character demands that of me. And so I can celebrate this new journey that I'm on at the same time with no regrets. In fact, I have joy in what we're going to be able to do. And so as a result of all of that activity and that hard work, Epicenter, my former employer, is going to be able to give $273,000 to energy-related scholarships for university students in the San Antonio region to the San Antonio Area Foundation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Long story, but thank you for listening. But it's been an amazing, difficult, it's hard, right, to think about something you've built from scratch, your baby. I gotta shut down my baby, but also it's not really mine, right? Yeah. It fulfilled its mission. That's the best thing, too. We did everything we set out to do at Epicenter when it was created. But it was time. We just all knew there was like this season. And Joel, I don't know if you've seen this, but sometimes people stay too long at the fair. Mm-hmm. And they don't know when, this is a season. The season is ending, and we need to stop and then go do the next thing and take all that we've learned and pack it into that.
Yeah, and you say sometimes we don't know when to leave. As a young business person in my 20s, I was in a leadership training, and this guy speaking had done well, quite successful. And he goes off on this little tangent, and basically he says, leave 5 minutes before they want you to.
Oh, that's good.
And he just pauses, the appropriate pause, and he goes, everywhere. Leave 5 minutes before they want you to. At your friend's party,
Yes.
at your mom's house,
Yes.
everywhere
Yes.
in business. Leave 5 minutes before they want you to.
So great.
And so if you carry that philosophy like you did, like it's time. Do I want to? Not really. Am I having fun? A lot. Is my heart here?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's still the right thing to do. And sometimes as leaders, we enjoy the easy stuff, right? The getting to fly in business class or first class. We enjoy, getting the executive privileges and all that kind of stuff. But we're also paid to make the tough decisions.
For sure.
And bravo to you for doing so. I'm sure it wasn't. There was probably parts of it even caused you to tear up.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine.
Yes, lots of tears.
And but still the right thing to do, and it lives on. I mean, depending on how Area Foundation manages that money, it could live on decades, if not longer.
Very much so. They're smart energy scholarships, and it thrills me because I was a first-generation college graduate in my family, and that thrills me because I hope that that's what it provides for other students, and to know that our hard work really paid off is such a joy. It really is wonderful.
And it's a cool story too. And you didn't have time to go into it, but you took that initial seed money and multiplied it and made it last way longer than it was intended to.
Definitely. No, I didn't talk about that. The original seed money was $5 million, and on a top line revenue, we went to 10.
Nice.
So it was pretty great. And so we were taking care of ourselves. So, but it's a joy.
Yeah.
How great is that? You can end something and it's joyful.
Yeah.
So that's good news. So
joyful ending. That could be a book title.
nobody would read it.
It's not enough drama.
Not enough drama. Not enough trauma.
So Gary, your wife's full time with you now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we, well, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
So I actually hired her last fall, but what we did prior to that is we talked about where she's going to go when she started making these decisions, and that's when we started talking about bringing her into the business. So one of the first things that we did, and she can interject here when she needs to, is that we planned a retreat. So we talked about that, and I think we talked to a business coach before that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, which he gave us great advice in that process. He was talking about make sure that you pick your roles, your lanes, what you're going to do, and do all that. So what we did was we took a week out in East Texas in the middle of nowhere, in the
middle of nowhere.
in the Davy Crockett National Forest, and
right.
we didn't just relax. We took our dog with us. We hung out out there. We had our whiteboards up, and every day we got up and we did our planning sessions. We went through. She explained some of her processes. We got all that together, what our roles were going to be. So we picked that, who's going to do what, how it's going to be, and all that, and put it down and came back and then started executing on it, which has been phenomenal. So I had a lot of stuff in place. And I could back up, like one of her executive coaches was the one that really got me into executive coaching. She's now passed on. Her name was Virginia, and kind of a legend in the area here in San Antonio. And but that's what got me into it. I worked with her on some projects and other things.
You recruited him into coaching.
Yeah,
Nice.
she did. We had a conversation. At first, she was like, "She's talking to you about this," and
I want you to come in with it.
because my background, 15 plus years was in adult learning, professional learning, IT, and those types of things, and an executive in that business. And so I had a lot of experience, but she kind of she had a process and helped put things together from the coaching standpoint. So, and then throughout the time frame, I added some authorized partnerships for everything DISC and 5 behaviors of a team, those types of things. And then, so it was a natural kind of what she did from development side, and then what I was doing to kind of bring the pieces in together with what Jill. Now, fortunately, I had a lot of stuff in place to make the transition. So when she came in January of this year, officially, of course, now the official announcement, we kind of did a really kind of behind the scenes, worked on projects and stuff like that. She made a statement. She's like, I don't think I've ever been this busy. So we had everything ready. And so it looked like we just kind of flipped the switch, which it didn't, but it was behind the scenes, a lot of the work and a lot of process and getting things up and running.
Well, one of the best things that happened was he'd already been doing this, right, for how many years, 5 years. And we already had the LLC, we had the business structure already in place. So when we've met with a couple of coaches in business coaching, and they're like, you're kind of way ahead of my normal client load, but no, we need you to look at us and see what's missing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but that was a real gift that we had already established the company, and he'd done so much of this work. So.
Oh, and it was our yearly goal we hit basically in Q1 of this year. So the goal that we set back in was
the financial
goal and
We're
the other
so
stuff.
blessed.
Yeah, so we knew that God was blessing it, and it really helped us achieve some of the things that we've kind of dreamed about over our being married and stuff like that. One is just giving, like she's talking about, through the organization and being a blessing to others. So we've been able to do that more through different areas, which has been fantastic. Yeah.
So how's it been having me over?
Probably one of the smartest business decisions that I've made, because I actually did hire her. So it was like I hired the paperwork, did all the stuff and all the things, and then we did the transition to in the business side and everything.
So how many men do you know who would hire their wife to technically be their boss?
Very few. Very few. I did talk to one time, one of my clients that I was coaching, through circumstances beyond his control. He had to elevate his wife to the CEO position. And then over several years, the circumstances changed where he was available again to be more of a leader. And one day we were trying to process all this stuff. And finally one day, just to help solidify some things, I looked at him and I said, if she weren't your wife, would she still be your CEO, or would you fire her?
What was the answer?
Stay tuned for the next episode. He made the tough answer, but it allowed him just to wrestle with what he'd been wrestling with.
Yes.
Being able to segregate she as his wife and she as the CEO. Yeah. And he really had to process that.
Yeah.
He had to understand what the differences were so that he could talk to her as the CEO and talk to her as his wife. But yeah, I can't think of bravo to you for hiring a CEO.
It's administratively her gift, her things that she does, and she does well, and the co-role, and it helps define us in the business. So when calls need to be made, I can, like you're talking about, look at her from the CEO perspective, and that's happened a couple of times. So
it's story?
Well, you can if you want to.
So the really challenging thing, we work from home, and this is for somebody I know.
Yeah.
We work from home, and our house is a small craftsman bungalow, and then my office is out in our casita, a move that we made during COVID, which was so smart to separate our offices. So it's an outbuilding, and so his office is what would be the sitting room for the master bedroom, and it's in between the master bath and the bedroom. So I am present while I'm getting ready, and if he's at his desk, invariably we end up having business conversations while I'm putting my makeup on or whatever. And so I used to have to tell him, he's a pilot by training, you may remember that, and I'd have to say, get out of my mental airspace, I'm trying to think. But in this particular morning, we were having a business conversation, and I was trying to get him to see something from my perspective. And finally, I walked out of the bathroom because we're talking, across. And I walked out, and I looked at him. I go, I am speaking to you as your CEO and not your wife. Listen to me.
In the bathroom, I'm your wife. Out here, I'm your CEO.
Exactly. And finally, he went, okay, But because we have that kind of marriage, we have developed these habits over the years, we can be very spicy. I don't mean spicy like cute. I mean spicy like a little bit testy with each other, but that's our style. And so managing that, honestly, we probably have less of that in our business just in living together, cleaning up the kitchen, right? So that's what's been really interesting about it, because we are really both professional and good at what we do. And so, but that has been one of the funniest dynamics. That finally, I got, look at me,
It's the CEO.
No, and I think that comes back to the business coach that really helped
Yeah.
us,
Give us good
define it, because it
advice.
did. I locked in when she said that. It clicked with me, and I locked into that that mode. And so it's definitely important, because I think it's some of the things that I see when they struggle with that in business, they don't have those roles defined. It's not just in
marriage,
in
right?
marriage
Yeah.
or partnership, and that they just don't clearly define the role, who does what and who has the call, and that makes all the difference. And you also understand what you want to do versus what you don't want to do, and when you get to a place, what you need to unload, what is it you can handle, and I know you deal with that with a lot of businesses and helping them work through that. But a lot of times, to grow, you've got to let things go.
Yeah.
You got to know when to let
Gary,
go.
that's an interesting point about the role definition. I used to be of the opinion it was the smaller companies that didn't do that well. I'm becoming more and more convinced it's pretty much all companies.
It is all companies.
And in fact, Patrick Lencioni, one of his latest books, The Motive, he likes to tell stories as part of getting his point across. And this guy's actually running a fairly good size company in the story, and as the CEO, but he's wrestling with, he grew up in a different part of the organization, and how he still is drawn to that part of the organization, and he's justified it as well. To be a good CEO, we've really got to be good in that department, right? And so part of that story, now that I think about it through the lens of what you just said, is really that Lencioni's wrestling this character through this role definition, redefining, because he shouldn't still be participating in that space.
No.
As the leader, he needs to be in a different space and a different mindset.
You made me remember something. I was working with a team of executives, and I've seen this so much that two things. One, they're trying to go back and do their comfort level, right? Because that's part of that, is that that's something where you came up, you tend to want to go back to those first things learned, right?
Yeah, it's also a fear response. It's what you not only just comfortable, but when you're under pressure, stress, you tend to revert back to those things. Yeah.
So, or you don't feel like anyone can do it as well as you can, and that's a matter of pride, right? Two things. One, you rob the people under you of gaining that experience and the gravitas, so that means that's more work for you, because they never grow and they never flourish, right? The other thing I told this group of executives, I said, look, if you are doing anything but blessing something that your people bring to you, vetoing something your people bringing to you, or redirecting it, you are not doing your job, you're doing theirs. And they just kind of looked at me, like that. It was like it didn't compute, that you literally, you got to drive your people. And sometimes I've had to drive them to this point. Bring me ideas, bring me solutions. They may be terrible, right? Because then I can redirect, or I can pull something out of them. But unless they exercise those muscles, they will never be who you need them to be for your organization to grow and flourish, or to deepen your bench of experience, expertise, and also it helps you see what they're really made of. So I agree with you. It's not just small little companies. It's any company at all. The other corollary to that is right people, right seats. And one of the things we dealt with recently was a leader who was not in the right seat, and it was causing. It was it's funny though, those things, highly successful, highly dysfunctional organization. And we began to work with, they brought us in to do an assessment. And so we began to assess at the way that the role that this leader was playing, and that how it was handicapping in some ways and phenomenally performing in others, right? So you don't lose the phenomenal performance. But at the same time, you've got to redirect this leader, because it's not unsustainable. And in that challenge, what ended up happening is the leader's leaving. Some people can make that kind of transition, but it's a very special person that can do that. So it's okay. They'll do better for it, but there's a season of it's painful. It really, really is. So those two things, to me, go together, is what's the proper role? How do you define those roles? How do you stay in your lane? And then sometimes you do need to be a utility player, but you'll know it. It'll be appropriate.
You guys have both been leaders, executives. you're both coaches, you're consultants. How do you start to help somebody wrestle with this defining their roles? Like, are there some diagnostic questions you use? Is there some paradigm setups that you do? Is there?
You're gonna look at me.
Yeah. You do this every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great. There's a lot of different places to start. I tend to like to start with some sort of assessment, style assessment. As a leader, what is their style? I'll bring in something like Everything Does. If they have an intact team, that's where the 5 behaviors process would be. But it's amazing when you come into organizations, they're already having problems. The team is not really intact, and there's a lot of reasons for that things are happening. But you got to start with that, and it's really an introspection of that individual and where they are, and then defining that. And then if they can do the team and bring in what it is, then you can start from there. She said some of the right people, right seats. I mean, is it the right person? Do they have the right strategy, and are they executing on that? Those are things that are completely, and then obviously, kind of the EO principal side. It's the cash flow on the backside as well that you're looking for. And usually one of those things are gonna stand out. But a lot of times the leader doesn't know where they are, or they have. I'm hearing this a lot lately, which is imposter syndrome, which is they bring it. I'm not even asking them that question. It's like they're bringing it up themselves. And but I hear a lot of that, which means that they're not confident about where they are. They don't understand. They're just not really confident. They don't understand where they need to go. Are they doing well? They don't see any of that, those types of things happening. And so they need to properly assess not only themselves, but where their team is and how they're going to get there, and then what the journey is in that. And part of that is that the big thing for me, and this came out of previous stuff that I used to do in teams that I worked with, is a lot of people have difficulty doing development plans. And one of the things I mean by that is the hardest one to do is for yourself. Number one, you're laughing, but it's true.
Yeah, no.
It is. If you can do one for yourself, because it's easy to see in other people, you need to do that. What about you? What do you need to do, and how are you going to do there, and where are you going to be in the next 6 months, a year, or those types of things? That's a key issue. And if they're good at doing development plans, are they good at holding that accountability, inspiring others to be able to do that and develop and build that? But if they've lost the trust, they've lost everything. Meaning, like, if they're not in, and a lot of leaders struggle with this because they don't. They know they need to do it, but how to build that trust? Which, back to Lencioni's thing, he talks about vulnerability-based trust, and that's the key. Which means the leader's got to take the step forward and do it first and create that environment and those things for the team to be able. They've got to set the boundaries, all the stuff that goes with that, to create a successful organization.
Well, and I would jump onto that. For me, the way I have built my best teams and defined roles was, one, to understand their bents, their giftings, their abilities, but two, to help get them to do it. That they would sit as a team, and then we would talk about all of the business functions that we have to perform at, and that we, to some extent, with the leader's guidance, help them parse that in a way. Because anytime you take an opportunity to let the people involved decide with guardrails, right, decide their future or how they're going to function together, to me, that is... it works the best because it breaks down resistance. They have bought in theoretically. And I try everywhere I go, and if I'm working with clients, is to help them see that they're not tapping into what their team really can offer them if they're not doing that.
Do you see a generational difference in people that are willing to engage this philosophy? Like, do boomers tend to be more command and control, and younger generation tend to be more collaborative? Or is it really independent of age?
I think it's organization. I think it's culture, organization, which culture is very, very difficult to. It takes time to change the culture and do those things. So those are, and understanding that, and previous career. I mean, I used to work with, people wanted to be like Southwest Airlines or those types of things. And I actually worked with Southwest Airlines, and so that's kind of a fantasy culture when early on and how they approach things, and that when I was talking to one of the managers there, and you can't adopt somebody else's culture. It's individual to the organization, and the people bring that you can incorporate some of those things and that. But it's trying to figure out how to answer this question the best way possible. I don't think it's generational, because I mean, you have I just more think it's mindset and where they've come from, and that hangs them up more than anything else. I don't think it's generational.
Yeah, I agree.
Y'all touched on, not your words, but this idea of the willingness of the leader to be reflective and to self-assess and to create their own development plan. That was one of the things I admired about you, Kimberly, is when we were working together, you allowed me and your peers to come in and do a 360 without you in the room, talking to your executive team. What's Kimberly do well? What's she not do well? What she need to start, stop? All those diagnostic type questions. Talk to me about that process. You experienced it, and then maybe your thoughts on leaders you've seen that have willing to engage in that and or weren't, and some thoughts around that.
Well, one of the things you may remember from our last conversation, I talked about a CEO that I had that I worked directly for, who got really crosswise with one of his major constituents in the corporate environment. And he would get feedback that he was going down a dangerous path with this particular group of people. There were other people that were very happy with him because he made a lot of money for the organization. But that said, one of the things I watched him not be able to do was be able to take that feedback and turn it into personal change, even if you don't agree with the feedback, is to be able to adapt in a way that you can build bridges with that constituency. And it turned out that it led to his demise. Ultimately, there was such an uproar with this very important constituency that the board let him go. Okay. So that taught me a very valuable lesson. One, you've got to listen. And then I had my own experience that was difficult because I realized I was out of touch in some ways. And also there were some things I just couldn't help. And so it cost me it was a high price to pay in my relationships. All of that to say is those things helped me when I got into the opportunity to build my culture from scratch at Epicenter. I could invite my team to be honest and to be forthright with me. And, Joel, you were doing that once a year with my team. And you interviewed him, too, which was interesting. And they were they were looking for stuff. They told me later they were looking for, and you did too, they were looking for stuff that, that they could give constructive criticism to, which still was valuable. But I didn't wait to once a year to ask for their feedback, because I would routinely, and I advise CEOs that I do advise some other CEOs, and I will say to them, is that ask your team what you're doing that makes them crazy. Please ask them that and give them room to be able to be honest with you. But I always told my team, I'm happy, please tell me the truth, but do it diplomatically. Put some sugar on it for me, because I need, let me be able to hear it. And we actually spend a lot of time in our practice being able to tell stories, difficult stories, to people that they need to hear, but to do it in a way they can hear it. You can say something, but somebody cannot hear it. And that's what I saw my CEO face. He couldn't hear it. It wasn't penetrating his armor. And so, one, I was trying not to have improper armor that was impenetrable, and to be a vulnerable leader, but also not be a weak leader. Difference. Being vulnerable is strong. Yeah,
that's good. Gary, your thoughts around leaders taking feedback?
I have a different. I'm going to interject something here, because a lot of times.
Disagree with me?
No. I don't disagree with anything she said. I think a lot of times the leaders, their decisions are made, and they're pushing out the communication. I'm sorry, hitting the mic here, and they're pushing out that communication down, and so they think the organization is hearing them because they're getting what I call bobblehead feedback. They're getting the head nod. Whereas the individual that's down, they're like, okay, is this the next new thing? Is this Are they really serious about doing this right now? These are the questions that are going through. They're not answering all the questions in the communication that they're driving down in the organization, because sometimes they're out of touch with those individuals in the organizations. Mm-hmm. So they think they're hearing that, and I'm like, no, they're not hearing you, like she's talking about. And it's the other way too. A lot of times leaders will do the same thing. They do the head nod back on the other side, and they're not really hearing what people are saying on that. So it's I think a lot of leaders, when it's very critical, it's like a 360 feedback can be very, very difficult, because there can be some ugly stuff in there, and you can kind of mitigate some of it. And some of those that I do, and Virginia very, very wisely coached me in this, is that she goes, I send those out on Friday at 5:00. Which is, the reason for that is because they have the weekend to process it. They're not, if you give it to somebody on a Monday and it hacks them off, the entire work week is shot. They're not, they're going to be thinking about this feedback. If there's a little bit of critical, they're processing, it's emotional. So it's a highly charged emotional response. And when we have those types of things, we have to consider both sides of that. And to answer your question, I think in any conversation, it's highly charged emotional. We have to figure out how to have that effectively with that person, meaning when is the right time? Everything that may have been said was 100% correct, exactly at the wrong time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're going to get the wrong response. Mm-hmm. And that is, to me, that's a big key that a leader has to figure out, is that not what you said was wrong, the timing that you said it was wrong in the way that it came across, and maybe the word choice was poor in that. And so if the wall goes up immediately. If you hear something, boom, wall goes up. I don't hear anything else you're saying after that. Mm-hmm. Completely don't hear it.
The best thing I found to diffuse that was to make sure that I had enough relationship with the person. They knew I was genuinely on their side. Mm-hmm. And it still doesn't take away the sting of difficult feedback, but it at least lets them know I'm coming from a place of caring for you. Mm-hmm. And also, I'm not going to be mean to you. I'm going to be constructive and kind as much as I can be on this. But I am going to make sure you leave the room understanding, because I have seen leaders give feedback, but the person left still feeling like everything was fine and not understanding they were on the verge of being fired. And then when they get fired, they're so shocked. Well, shame on that leader for not ensuring that they understood how high the stakes were, because they were too chicken to tell the truth. And so that I was like, I've been in those shoes, and I understand that it's hard sometimes to tell people that, And
that reflects badly on the leader.
It does.
Because the team sees that.
Yeah, and there's a ditch on both sides of the road, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You can either be so gentle that they don't get the message.
Right.
Or you can be so harsh that,
and they think you're a meanie, and your credibility has just gone out the window. That's the other thing. I'm a meanie. That's a real technical term, isn't it?
Well, that's what we use on this podcast, is really technical
meanies,
terms.
Yes, or jerks. I was going to say that. Yeah.
Well, I want to kind of put a bow around this particular episode. I'd love to, if we have time, I'd love to have you guys back on another show, because there was prior to this show, we were talking about a couple of topics, and there's another one that sounds like a lot of fun. But as we kind of put a bow on this one, any thoughts kind of to wrap this segment up?
Yeah, I mean, I want to, one of the things is that for us, I've had so many people tell me I could not work with my wife or I could not work with my husband. And that's probably true in a lot of cases. We've been really blessed. I grew up in a home where that was the norm. Our family worked in family businesses. My parents worked together, sometimes well, and sometimes they were very stormy. But I learned how to navigate that. What I would say is, for us, and if you have the opportunity to do it, it can be a real wonderful thing, a big blessing for us. We were already a team, and we've done ministry together in a church setting and outside of a church setting. So we already had sort of that dynamic of seeing something, a finish line we needed to get across, or so forth. Two things we've learned is that, one, unity is really important. before you walk in a room to do anything, whether it is, say, ministry, because we would never go into a situation where we just had a fight and we hadn't at least said, I love you and I'm sorry, and we'll deal with the rest of it later. The same is true in business, is that if we have a disagreement or we have things, we make really quick work of it because we know it creates a vulnerability and a disunity that a wedge would love to be driven between us. And that we can never do all that we've been called to do and need to accomplish if we don't maintain that unity. Do we like each other sometimes? No. Do we agree? Heavens no. That would be boring. But that we have esteem and respect and love for each other, and that we really do maintain, even if it's agree to disagree. And that's true of marriage, and it's certainly true of business.
That's good.
And so that's the dynamic, I think. And then distance. Sometimes you just need to get away from each other a little bit.
Carrie, any final thoughts?
No, that was actually a really, really good wrap up that she did there. So the disagreement, I would call it more healthy conflict. You know, that we and I think that's good for any business, not only just in general, but too many things that I've seen with. And again, Patrick Lindsay, so it calls it artificial harmony. People act like they're getting along and everything. You know, it's the social media thing, and everything looks great. We know that that's not a reality in real life, and taking on those challenges, and that's what she's really talking about. Being able to work, especially as a team, husband and wife working together, you're going to have challenges. I'm not going to sugarcoat that and say that they don't exist, because they do exist, and you're running a business. So you not only, you got the personal dynamic and the two, so you have to really listen. I guess is the best way to say it. Listen and really acknowledge, and then if it is a highly charged emotional conversation, to back out and find a time to have the conversation when it's the right time. Those are the key things that I would really say.
The other thing is, don't call your husband honey in a business meeting.
Yeah, she did that.
I'm almost completely broken of it. I won't say 100%, but I did that with
that one caught me off guard.
Well, as long as you call all the other guys in the room honey, then it'll throw them off.
There you go.
All right. It's been a pleasure having you guys on the show, and hopefully we can have you guys back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to our channel.